Today I will take you to watch a Thai zombie movie called The Black Death. This movie is cruel and thrilling. The scenes are bloody and intense, and it is definitely the best choice to watch while eating. Without further ado, let us get into the main story. In 1565, during the reign of King Maha Chakraphat of Thailand, a terrible plague occurred. It is said that this plague was brought to Thailand by ships from Iran and Portugal, and tens of thousands of people died because of it. What is even more frightening is that those infected with this plague did not die directly, but turned into terrifying, bloodthirsty zombies. Time passed quickly. Months went by in a blink. And because transportation and communication were inconvenient at the time, many places in Thailand did not know about the existence of the terrible plague. On a leisurely afternoon, a young couple was dating by the river, but the man noticed a human figure in the water. He thought someone was peeping, so he cursed loudly and was about to go into the water to catch the thief. The girl, worried about her lover's safety, carefully moved to the riverbank, only to see red blood dyeing the river where her boyfriend had disappeared. A few days later, two hunters were hunting wild boar in the mountains and happened to find the man's bloody corpse. With their rich experience, the two quickly judged that the wounds on the man's body were not from wild animals in the mountains, but looked more like human bite marks. At the same time, in an entertainment house in the city, Quan was enjoying himself. Just as he was floating in pleasure and preparing to push down the girl to relax, he found that the girl was deaf and mute. He softened for a moment, handed his money bag to the girl, and turned to leave. He then returned to his simple residence, drinking and chatting with his co-workers, and they talked about the drunk man Thep lying unconscious on the ground. His friend told him that this Thep used to be a victorious general, but a few months ago, his army was mysteriously wiped out in battle, and after he returned home, he gave up on himself and became like this. What they did not know was that Thep's army had faced the terrible zombie plague. Even more frightening was that the zombie plague was gradually approaching this remote town. That night, a man was holding a torch and preparing to go home for dinner when he suddenly heard strange noises coming from the woods by the road. He immediately stopped and looked around, but he was still a step too late and was knocked down by a zombie rushing at him. Soon the man was torn apart by a group of zombies. By the time he was found again, he had become a mutilated corpse covered in sores. The abbot of the local temple took his disciple Kong and rushed to the scene. The abbot frowned and examined the body for a long time, finally judging that the plague ravaging the country had reached here. Kong, who was standing by, heard the news and quickly sneaked into the house of the largest landlord in the village. It turned out that he had long been in love with the landlord's daughter Min, but the landlord looked down on him as a poor boy and obstructed them many times. He simply took this opportunity to sneak into Min's room, planning to elope with her on a merchant ship passing through the town. Unfortunately, the landlord had already guessed, and as soon as they went out, a few servants caught them and beat Kong up. Even so, the landlord was not satisfied and was ready to draw his knife to kill the boy. Min quickly ran over to beg her father for mercy and promised in public that she would never see Kong again, so the landlord finally spared him. Of course, the well-informed landlord also knew that the zombie plague had appeared near the town, and staying there would mean disaster. The next day, he ordered his family to pack up their valuables and flee. But Min still could not forget Kong and secretly got off the carriage halfway. Min's mother discovered it and, afraid of angering the landlord, chased after her alone. But after all, she was old, and after chasing for a long time, she only wandered around in the forest. And in the end, she still did not catch up with Min. Meanwhile, the landlord also found that his wife and daughter were missing and immediately ordered the convoy to turn back to find them. Suddenly, terrible roars came from the dark forest, and the landlord hurriedly raised his torch to see clearly. But the group of zombies had already surrounded them, and the servants' legs went weak with fear, so they were quickly wiped out. At the same time, the town's entertainment house was still full of singing and dancing, and the mute girl Ploy, whom Quan liked, was drinking with customers in the hall. Unfortunately, she could not handle alcohol, and before the customer was satisfied, she was already drunk and dizzy. The customer saw her like this and was ready to pay and let her go back to sleep. He reached into his pocket and found that his money bag was gone. Unexpectedly, the manager Jun blamed Ploy without distinction, tied her to a pillar in the hall, and whipped her. Fortunately, Quan passed by and saw this scene, rushed up to stop it, and finally saved Ploy by paying 3 times the fee. Almost beaten to death, Ploy decided to escape and put poison in the wine of Jun and the boss. The old boss died on the spot from one breath, but Jun survived, Ploy ran away in the chaos, and Jun was convinced that she had tampered with the wine, so he chased after her with 2 thugs. Ploy ran desperately and finally met her savior before collapsing, the knife-wielding Thep. She hugged Thep's leg, babbling for help, and when Thep nodded, she quickly ran into the forest. Jun was about to give chase when Thep threw over the bundle he was carrying in his left hand. One of the thugs opened it and found a zombie's head inside. Realizing that the zombie plague had spread, Jun no longer cared about catching her and hurried back to town. But zombies had already appeared in the town, and villagers who did not understand the zombie plague thought their transformed companions were possessed. They immediately invited the temple abbot and the Christian priest. The abbot knew about zombies, so he stood far away at the door and only arranged for Kong to go forward to check. The priest wanted to conduct a full examination of the zombie, but at the critical moment, the zombie suddenly broke out, broke its ropes, and bit the priest's artery. Then it climbed onto the beam and pounced on Kong. Fortunately, Kong had practiced some skills in the temple and resisted the zombie's ferocious bite, then picked up a barrel and knocked it away. Fueled by adrenaline, Kong raised the barrel and smashed the zombie's head repeatedly until it burst, then ran out to meet his companions and escape. At this time, a large number of zombies had already rushed into the town, and countless villagers were knocked down by zombies before they could even react. At the critical moment, Thep carried a knife to the blacksmith shop and rescued his lover, the owner, Lady Bua, immediately. This Bua was also a tough person, and after she knew the weakness of zombies was the head, she simply threw away the machete in her hand, picked up 2 big hammers from the table, and killed her way out with Thep. What they did not know was that the situation in the entertainment house was not optimistic either. Even Jun was targeted by a zombie. He grabbed the antique hunting rifle in his office to try to kill the zombie, but because it was poorly maintained, it could not fire at the critical moment. He retreated while grabbing the antique sword on the table, but when he pulled it out, he remembered that he had secretly switched it earlier, and there was no blade in the scabbard, only a handle. Regretful, Jun was about to be pounced on by the zombie, when suddenly there was a bang, and the zombie exploded into pieces in front of him. It turned out to be the security chief of the guild hall, Lek, who carried a 100-kilogram cannon to rescue him. At this time, Ploy, who had escaped earlier, also returned to the village, only to find that it had already become a paradise for zombies. In her panic, she was almost bitten by a white-bearded zombie, but at the critical moment, it was Quan who killed the zombie and saved her again. This time, Ploy could no longer care about restraint, and she directly hugged Quan, crying with tears. Soon after, Quan and Kong followed the crowd of refugees back to the temple and happened to meet Mian's mother. She hurriedly begged Kong for help, saying that Mian had disappeared in the woods at the east end of the village. Kong quickly called his friend Quan to search along the road, and they found Mian trapped in a hut, being surrounded by zombies. Fortunately, Mian was quick with her hands and feet while screaming, and when the zombies rushed in, she knew to wave the hoe on the ground to resist, and she finally held on until Kong and Quan arrived. Meanwhile, many zombies followed the refugees and surrounded the small temple. The abbot sat cross-legged and chanted scriptures to encourage everyone. The uninformed villagers thought the scriptures could resist zombies, so they sat around the abbot to pray for Buddha's blessing. Unfortunately, as the chanting went on, the wounded who had been bitten by zombies suddenly twitched, opened their eyes, and began to attack all the living. The villagers who had been blocking the door saw that there were zombies in the temple, so they simply turned around and ran. With enemies from both inside and outside, the small temple soon fell. At this time, Thep and Bua had just arrived at the temple gate, and when they saw that the temple had been breached by zombies, they rushed in to try to save people. As soon as they entered, they saw several zombies had already knocked down Ploy, so Thep killed the zombies with his knife, then pulled Ploy and rushed out. Mian's mother also wanted to follow, but unfortunately she was a few steps too slow and was surrounded by 3 zombies and killed on the spot. The 3 who escaped from the small temple ran toward the entertainment house in the village and happened to meet Jun and Lek. Jun already had conflicts with Thep, so he immediately ordered the doors to be closed. But Thep was clearly faster, and he successfully rushed into the entertainment house. At this time, Kong and his group also returned to the small temple, only to see corpses all over the ground. But they had no time to grieve, and for survival they fought desperately and ran toward the entertainment house. Hearing his friends calling for help outside, Thep was about to open the door, but Jun was afraid of letting zombies in, and ordered Lek to stop them with the thugs. The 2 sides immediately fought, and Thep fought 1 against 3, standing at the door. Jun picked up a knife to try to attack secretly, but Bua was not polite, and with 1 hammer strike, Jun was seriously injured and fell to the ground. Without Jun's obstruction, the others finally agreed to open the door to save people. Everyone raised their weapons and rushed out, hacked the zombies around the door, then turned and ran inside. But just as they were about to close the door, the swarming zombies jammed it. Thep grabbed a knife and slashed madly at the zombies in the doorway. But the zombies did not feel pain, and although they lost arms and legs, they still squeezed in desperately. Seeing they could not hold it, one of the thugs suddenly roared, forced his way through the zombies, and rushed out, so the others finally closed the door. But he was attacked and eaten by the zombies outside. The remaining 8 people finally gained temporary peace, and Thep was the calmest. He said that there was a shortage of food and clothing here, and it was impossible to hold out for long. After dawn, he would lead people to break through. Those willing to follow should prepare early, and those unwilling should stay here. After speaking, he went to find a place to rest, and the others dispersed to rest. Among them, Quan wanted to relax once more before leaving, so he went to the warehouse to get some contraband. He did not know that his arrival awakened a female zombie in the warehouse, and through the curtain, Quan thought it was Ploy coming to him. He was about to speak romantic words when the female zombie rushed in and bit his calf. In pain, Quan grabbed a long smoking pipe nearby and shoved it into the zombie's mouth, barely escaping the deadly attack. Hearing the noise, the others rushed over, and Thep, seeing the female zombie still trying to bite, cut off its head with one strike. Kong quickly grabbed a cloth to bandage Quan's wound. Ploy then took the initiative to care for Quan. Looking at the black infection spreading up Quan's leg, everyone knew that before long, Quan would also become a zombie. For everyone's safety, Kong and Thep discussed and finally decided that Kong would be the one to end Quan's life. Just as he was about to do it, Ploy suddenly reached out to block the knife, indicating that she would be the one to do it. Unexpectedly, Ploy did not act, but hugged Quan tightly. Just as Quan was gradually beginning to mutate, more and more zombies broke through the door and rushed in. Facing the chaos, Thep rushed out first and killed wildly. Lek also picked up the huge cannon to attack zombies. To reduce the pressure in the hall, Thep rushed into the yard shouting and led most of the zombies away. Lek, however, was bitten because he was not agile enough, but he was not afraid, and he jammed the cannon into the ground with all his strength. The gunpowder hidden in the cannon barrel exploded instantly, and with a bang, the zombies in the hall were blown into pieces. Kong and Mean had left earlier, so they were not affected. Bua was a step slower, and the explosion blasted her out, leaving her covered in wounds. But her will to survive made her stand up again, and she carried 2 hammers, ran all the way to the river, and finally saw a merchant ship anchored in the middle. For survival, Bua swam desperately to the ship and finally climbed onto the deck. At this moment, she sat on the ground exhausted, breathing heavily with a sense of relief. But what awaited her on the ship was not salvation, but a group of hungry zombies. Meanwhile, Kong also brought Mean to the river, but Mean's face had turned pale. She lifted her skirt and told Kong that she had actually been bitten yesterday, but she was afraid that Kong would be unwilling to leave alone, so she endured until now. After saying this, she gave Kong a deep kiss, then took out a knife and ended her own life. Having lost his lover, Kong was in despair, and he drew his knife to commit suicide. With a clang, his knife was struck away by another blade, and when Kong looked up, it turned out to be Thep who had broken through the siege. Encouraged by Thep, Kong picked up his knife, turned all his pain into fury, and charged at the zombies by the river, eventually becoming one of the infamous zombie killers. The movie The Black Death created a first-class horror atmosphere. The entire movie was dark in tone. The build-up before the zombies appeared was detailed and heavy, and when the zombies suddenly appeared, it absolutely made the audience's scalp tingle. The editing, which also prioritized the horror atmosphere, sacrificed the story, but overall, it is still worth watching. All right, that is the end of today's story. See you next time.